It's funny that I mentioned royalty in my last video because you have Joe Biden and the white ladies like um, that live in America that are Democrats. They call themselves Democrats, but they love sort of love royalty and love acting like royalty and act like Trump. It's funny that I mentioned them because I'm also thinking about how Trump was like trying to trying to be the leader of like mankind, and these people who don't do anything except for pretend to be rich and pretend to be like uh, smart and pretend to be caring, and they pretend to be everything that they're not. They pretend, they're the they're not running anything, but they're running things that people like Prince William, who are royalty, are having such a tough time handling. People like Prince Harry are having such a tough time handling, which is like black people and Mexican people, and the only person who can really uh, talk about those is like Hillary Clinton, because she's not one of these like spoiled kind of like women who's sitting here and trying to be white. She doesn't she hasn't uh, she hasn't accepted that philosophy controls everything, like the Bidens and the Harrises, have superficial, phony, spoiled, unuseful ways of handling publicity, ways of handling relationships with people, have ways of handling relationships with people who need help, people who have problems, with the country. As you see, they don't do anything. And read all the headlines. Look at all the headlines. What do they talk about? They talk about nothing. The plan for America has erased Hillary Clinton, which that was, I think, the Royals' plan. Unfortunately, I think it was to the MSNBCs. Everybody helped them erase Hillary, and who knows what would have happened if she would have won the presidency. But for the religious fanatics to take over during Trump, erase everybody's mind, and have everybody focus on being great, and then have the spy programs that Trump ran completely still control people's brains and make them hate everybody because they're always obsessed with what's running inside from the shine people are getting, and the shine everybody's listening to, which is telling people that somebody's white and great, and that's why black people are like this, and that's why Mexican people are like that. It's erased. It's obviously the Bidens are I'm sorry to criticize Joe Biden himself, because he wouldn't have come off as a super black only person and somebody who white people are just ashamed to not ashamed but are worried about so much, if Trump hadn't been such an extreme religious fanatic, and if the people hadn't made such a big deal about Trump. But to focus on making movies and stories about a Cyrus the Great, or a Jesus, or a white person, it's just beneath the intelligence of college-educated people. It's beneath, which is the whole irony of the thing, because Hillary and the Royals, they're all figuring out, like, now how do we deal with somebody like this? Even the Bushes are figuring out, how do we, what did they do? They created a critical race theory, which wanted to really invade the privacy of a lot of people's lives, and bring all the hate from losing the election to somebody who called Mexicans and ISIS rapists, He called those people rapists, and all the Democrats got upset. It's an absolutely it's an absolutely uh, difficult time, for the whole world to understand, because uh, because Trump hasn't gone away, and Trump is still thinking of being great again, and it leaves me confused, and it leaves me wondering: is it Trump that did this to me, or is it the Democrats that don't want anybody to deal with Trump because he might be as religious as he is, and he might be as just completely capitalistic as he is, and fascist as he is, rude as he is, and unarticulate as he is, and hateful as he is, and jealous and spiteful and evil as he was, and tough, which backs and uses people like Pompeo, and he uses people like Grinnell, and he uses people like Ted Cruz, and uses. People like those, maybe with the exception of Texans are always nice, so I don't want to label Ted Cruz in that situation. But everybody else he had around him was they just didn't know know anything about being treating people without toughness and without all this stuff. But now the Bidens and the the fake news, it kind of is just as bad to people who still need to make social change in different parts of the world. People who need to make social change, people who need to be accepted, they're just as bad as they were before Trump took office to those people. The Democratic leaders, I think, are still just as bad to those people, which makes it a really difficult situation for the world to be in, because people don't want to just continue going on without a clear understanding of who was lying about a certain person or a certain being or a certain whoever it was, that apparently apparently was a white person and called Cyrus the Great, or whatever, maybe he was white, maybe he was something. The USA is just really, really, really a terrible place for conducting mediation between people and people coming together as it stands right now. It's a really terrible place for that. It's kind of like being being judged by people in a country like the Islamic Republic of Iran, or somewhere, for not dressing appropriately, or for going against social norms that require you to dress or dress a certain way, and not doing that. That is kind of like the freedom that people needed from Trump to stand up against those kind of people for. But the Biden seem to want to take the freedom of speech that many people want to continue attacking the Iran deal and continue attacking the Islamic Republic of Iran. They want to kind of take the freedoms away from those people, which I don't think is a good idea. But at the same time, the Trumps didn't do anything when I don't know, the Trumps are still around. So as an Iranian American, as a Persian who's trying to tell you what his perspective is, there's nothing but there's nothing but hate from me toward the Democrats and the people and the celebrities that treated me like a villain because of voting and being so connected to Trump, or wanting to make America great, or something, and get out of try and avoid change the Iran deal because I didn't know what the Iran deal was, and I did know that it rewarded people that didn't have fair laws and fair judgment when it came to judging people, treating people fairly, treating people with respect, giving human rights to people, giving human rights to women, giving human rights to men, giving freedom to those people, and not and they and at this in this time of day, threatening the lives of dissidents for speaking out when that regime commits illegal violations of every law in the world when it comes to human rights, which includes jailing citizens, torturing citizens for not following Islamic dress codes and other things like that. And those are the kind of people that Obama had controlling the Iran policy. I think that those kind of people do not belong controlling the Iran policy. I don't care if America hates me for supporting Trump during those times, and I still don't care if they hate me for it. Personally, I've been for 4 or 5 years completely targeted for being an outspoken person about Iran issues and trying to change that culture back to a culture where we had freedom of dress, freedom of women, freedom of everything, and we didn't have to read about Islam in schools from kindergarten to whenever we were older. We never had to read about all this stuff, and I think that it's very illegal, and it needs to be. And I think that part of the regime needs to be changed. Nobody needs to be learning religion in schools, and nobody needs to be threatened with death because of supporting the previous or a new Iran with a freedom of people to live there peacefully. For instance, a lot of former people from the former prince of Iran, the prince of Iran Reza Pahlavi can't return to Iran and live there and work there in the government. He can't do that, which should be a right, which should be a right. It's a right which these people that are in power there should not have any control over anymore. I mean, every Iranian, including myself, who's made movies against the regime and against the crimes they've committed against the Iranian people when it comes to human rights and stuff like that, which that regime has threatened me for. That regime has also would also probably threaten my life for returning to that country for, and it would probably put me in jail and kill me there if I return to that country just for making a movie about how they torture women who don't dress appropriately to them. They put them in jail. They jail protesters. They kill protesters just for peacefully protesting. It's a peaceful, you've seen it on the news when millions of them come out and march, and then you have thousands taken to prisons, and you have them jailed and tortured and even executed. The Iran deal needs to correct those issues. Needs to make the Iran deal must make the Iranian regime a fair and humane regime. It must be a regime that treats all citizens fairly, no matter whether or not they believe in the Shah of Iran or not, which is the thing that those people might hate. But that doesn't matter, because this is a world that we live in where people should not be in fear of their lives, in fear of their health, in fear of their in fear of being hurt by things. It's as if you start jailing white people in America if they don't like rap music. Does that sound logical? Does that sound logical to Joe Biden or Kamala Harris? Does that sound logical to the royals in England? Does that sound logical to the European Union, to the European government? Does it sound logical if somebody doesn't like, if somebody doesn't like a music or something? Does it seem logical that person? I mean, if somebody does like a music or something like that, does it seem logical that you can put that person in prison and torture them or jail them as long as you want, just because you're a government? We should not. The perspective here is that we should not have any governments which violate human rights. We should not have any governments in the whole world that violate human rights or violate freedom of speech of the people of that country and violate the rights of those people to form governments in those countries. We should not have one government in the whole world that does that. Besides the fact that every government should have enough money to pay for food and shelter for each of its citizens, which are my kind of laws and perspectives for what a humane world should include. The Iranian regime does not respect anything that I say unless it is actually included in maybe it should, because I think the Iranian people all respect what I say and they all respect what I'm thinking about. So it does not matter to me what's in the Iran deal. I think Donald Trump respects what I'm thinking about, and I think I respected the fact that he was not a fan of the current laws in Iran and the Iranian regime. And I think that we should listen to what I have to say. I am a candidate for president of Iran. I am a candidate for speaker for the people, for Iranians who are in Iran, and they have no voice there because they cannot speak like this, and they cannot publicly claim independence and freedom from dress codes and freedom from learning about Islam in school and or I don't know if they're forced to learn about certain things in school, but I know that they have cultural norms that are not respective of freedom and human rights. And what I'm saying is that the police cannot police citizens on how they dress, and they cannot police citizens on whether or not they want to make movies without women's chadors always on their heads. Those are some things that are policed in Iran. Every woman in every film has to have a chador on her head. Every woman has to speak Farsi. You cannot speak English in movies in Iran. I'm sure of that. You cannot speak English in music videos in Iran. I'm sure of that. You cannot talk in any government television show or any government movie or government sitcom or series or news show in Iran without first reciting greeting from the Quran and wearing a chador on your head, and that those are certain things that must be changed, because historically and still today Iranians are not Islamic people. I mean, they are Islamic people, but they have never. It's time that we free ourselves from the government that enforces these Islamic rules and claims that they're Islamic. It's time to erase those laws, and it's a time to make laws that respect human rights and civil society. It's a civil society, or civilians who don't have anything to do with government and just want to be free from government. As we should also have the same thing in the USA, but the problems in the USA are different than the problems in Iran when it comes to things like police and ethnic problems with shootings and rioting for freedoms in America, and also stuff like that, because in America you have more freedom to. I mean, that usually comes from having so much freedom that you have kids listening to rap music and being able to buy guns, and you have more crime, I think, in America, and more cops that are trained to shoot people because they have guns, because they could be using weapons or something. And that's the difference between the rioting, because in Iran the rioting comes from not having the freedom to dress how you. I mean, for women, it just comes from the freedom of not have. It comes from not having freedom to be able to speak without being afraid of what the government says, and not being able to dress freely and think freely and be free and be happy, to appreciate normal human rights and civil society. Thanks. I'm Shaheen Shokoofandeh, candidate for president of Iran. Thank you.